Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Reister, and I'm the Director of Elections in the Iowa Secretary of State's office. I would like to thank the Iowa Department of Human Rights for the opportunity to collaborate on this presentation regarding collection of voter registration applications and absentee ballot request forms. First, we'll start by talking about the qualifications to register to vote in the state of Iowa. To register to vote, you must be an eligible elector. And under our state statutes and state constitution, that means you must be a resident of Iowa. You have to be at least 17 and a half years old to register to vote and 18 on the day of the election to participate. You must be a United States citizen. You cannot claim the right to vote in any other place. You cannot be adjudged mentally incompetent for voting by a court. And you cannot be a convicted felon unless your rights have subsequently been restored by the President or the Governor. We have a voter pre-registration deadline in the state, which is 10 days before general elections by 5 p.m. and 11 days before all other elections by 5 p.m. The voter registration applications must be submitted to the county auditor's office by this deadline. If the applications are submitted by this deadline, the voter will appear on the election register when they show up at the polling place to vote. Of course, we also have Election Day registration in the state of Iowa, so if these deadlines are not met, voters can still register on Election Day. They will just be required to provide proof of identity and proof of residence when they appear to vote. This is what the current Iowa voter registration form looks like. The top section of the form is a qualifications section. Applicants must be able to answer yes to both questions on the form, indicating that they are eligible to register to vote. And that is required information that must be filled in on every form. All voter registration applicants must either provide their Iowa driver's license number, their Iowa non-operator ID number, or the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. If a voter registration applicant does not have one of these numbers, they must mark on the form that they do not have one of those numbers. This information in this box, in the ID number box, is also required information on a voter registration application and must be provided by every applicant. There's an additional information section. In this section, the date of birth for the applicant and the applicant's gender are required information. They must be filled out by all applicants. A phone or email address is additional information that is optional and is not required to complete the voter registration process. The voter's name is required, and so is the voter's residential address. These fields are the your name field and the address where you live field that appear on the form. If the voter receives mail at an address different from where they live, they should indicate that in the section of the form titled Where You Received Mail. The previous voter registration information is optional information. This will help us notify your prior registrar of voters that you have moved and help them to keep their voter registration list clean. Political party affiliation is also optional. It's not required. If a voter would leave this section blank, they will be registered as a no-party voter. Finally, I'm going to go back to the previous screen for a second. The other required information is the voter's signature, and you'll see that field at the very bottom of the form. All voter registration forms must be signed as well. Residency for voter registration purposes is where the voter claims it to be, and it is the voter's home or dwelling. In general, voters cannot register to vote in a business or a non-residential property unless it truly is a primary nighttime residence for that person. We do not have a durational residency requirement in the state of Iowa for voter registration, and what that means is that voters do not have to be present in the state for any minimum period of time before they're eligible to register and vote. If the voter has a residence that they declare to be their residence for voter registration purposes, that will meet the residency requirement. And then Related to the signature as required information, if a voter is unable to sign the form, they may request somebody's assistance in signing for them. Power of attorney does not count for voting purposes in Iowa, so if somebody is a power of attorney for somebody else and the voter is asking their power of attorney to sign their voter registration application for them, they should just sign the voter's name with no designation of power of attorney after that signature. Collecting voter registration forms. The forms can be downloaded from the Secretary of State's website at www.sos.iowa.gov. Copies can be made by any person who downloads the form. Anyone is also authorized to register voters in the state of Iowa. There are no special registration requirements for this activity, but all collected forms should be submitted to the appropriate county auditor's office or to the Secretary of State's office as soon as possible after they are collected, so the registration forms can be processed and the voters can be added to the voter rolls. The next portion of the presentation is related to absentee ballot requests. Any registered voter in the county may request an absentee ballot for any election that they're eligible to participate in. The absentee ballot request forms must be submitted to the county auditor's office, and the deadline for the applications to be submitted to receive an absentee ballot in the mail is 5 p.m. on the Friday before the election. On the absentee ballot request forms, there are also fields that are required information. The voter's name and date of birth are required information on the absentee ballot request form. The voter's ID number is optional on this form, but it is helpful for the county auditor when making sure that they have the right voter registration record in doing the entry. So the ID number is optional, but it is helpful. The voter's residential address is required. If the voter is already registered to vote in a particular county, but they've moved to a new address in the county, they can use this form to update their voter registration information in the county. Mailing address. This is an option if the voter is registered but wants their ballot mailed to a different address. This is where the voter would provide that information, and it goes into the box titled where your absentee ballot should be mailed. So for example, a student who's at college, they may maintain their voter registration residence at their parents' address, and that's acceptable for them to do under Iowa law. They would list their parents' address as their Iowa residential address, and then their address at school could be listed in the where your absentee ballot should be mailed portion of this form. Again, on absentee ballot request applications, the phone number and email information is optional, but it can be very helpful, especially if there is an issue with the voter's registration or absentee request. This helps the county auditor communicate with the voter regarding any issues that may crop up. The election type or date is also required information on this particular form. This is something if absentee ballots are being solicited, this could be pre-filled out. But one request can only be used to request a ballot for one election. You cannot request ballots for multiple elections using the same form. Party affiliation is only required information on an absentee ballot request form during the primary election that's held in June of even-numbered years. Other than that, this is not required information on an absentee ballot request form, but if it's included, it's not going to be a problem. And finally, a signature is required on an absentee ballot request application. And just like in the voter registration context, if a voter is unable to sign this form themselves, they may request somebody's assistance to sign the form as long as it's signed at the voter's request and in their presence. Again, a power of attorney cannot be used to sign an absentee ballot request application. In addition, when you're collecting absentee ballot request forms, you should know that applications that are solicited or collected for return by a person acting as an actual or implied agent for a political party, candidate, or committee, as defined by Chapter 68A, that person soliciting or collecting the forms has to issue a receipt to the voter upon collecting the form. The receipts need to contain the name of the applicant, the date and time the application was received from the applicant, the name and date of the election for which the ballot is being requested, the name of the party, candidate, or committee, the name of the person collecting the absentee ballot request, and a statement indicating that the request will be delivered to the county auditor and when the ballot will be sent by the county auditor. Any applications that are solicited for which receipts are issued must be delivered to the county auditor within 72 hours after the time that they are collected. And here's some contact information. You can reach us at the Iowa Secretary of State's Elections Division at 1-888-SOS-VOTE or by email at sos@sos.iowa.gov or by mail at the address listed on the screen. One question that's come up here as we've been putting this together is whether an Iowa student that is attending college in another state, whether they are eligible to register and or to continue to participate in Iowa elections. And the answer to that is yes. Students that are temporarily away from their permanent residence or their parents' address, they can choose whether they would like to register to vote in Iowa at that permanent address where their parents live, or if they would like to register to vote in their new state at school, subject to the new state's voter registration requirements. So that student would need to, if they wanted to participate in the other state, check with that state to find out what the requirements were. But certainly under Iowa law, they would still be eligible to request a ballot from their parents' address and have it mailed to them where they're attending college. Once again, I'm going to just repeat the contact information for the Secretary of State's office. You can reach us at the Elections Division by phone at 1-888-SOS-VOTE or by email at sos@sos.iowa.gov or by mail at the address that's printed on the screen.